looking for the living among the dead. That's the question that the two men in dazzling white, the only men that were there at the tomb in the Luke passage, are these that are clothed in dazzling white. We presume, based on what John said, that they were angels. It only makes sense since they appeared out of nowhere in the tomb. And they said, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead?" And how do you and I spend our time looking among the dead things of our life, the things of the past? How do we get stuck there? When we say that we're seeking out the living, whether it's the living Christ, it's the new life that God has given us, it's the gifts that God has prepared for us, we say we want those things, but we get stuck among the dead, looking around there in a tomb. The thing that's true in all four of the gospel accounts is that there is an empty tomb, but I'm going to tell you that's not enough. You can try to convince someone, don't do it. Don't get involved in a debate about faith, because faith is something that's not debatable. Once you have it, there's no amount of evidence that could take it away from you. And if you don't have it, there's no amount of evidence that's going to make you make a decision. It's an experience, isn't it? When we experience the living God, then our hearts begin to tell us that this is real. We don't need to measure it. Thank God that Luke was someone who measured things as best he could, but he's telling a story that includes things that are immeasurable. And I know I was kind of hard on John, because where was John in the Luke account? Yeah, he didn't show up in there, did he? He figures pretty prominently in the John account. So I like to just point out that sometimes we remember things differently. There's some races that I ran and I came in first in my mind. But I don't really have a medal to show for it, or a first place ribbon. So in this part of the sermon, I want to say that I don't want to be too hard on John, because John gets excited. And some of us can be accused of that, getting a little too excited, a little too enthusiastic sometimes. Maybe inviting people over to the house when you first meet them, and you didn't ask your spouse's permission yet. That's what John is doing here. Thank you, Sarah. He's getting a little bit too excited, because what's going on is that John's heart is completely devoted to Christ. He is the beloved disciple. What he might not know yet is that God loves everybody the same, that we are all beloved disciples, and that's what Jesus says to Mary. I am returning to my God and your God, to my Father and your Father, for you are joint heirs with me. Do you understand that you're a child of God, just as surely as Jesus is the Son of God? Do you take part in that? I know it's an awesome responsibility, and it can be overwhelming. But I don't want you to think of it as overwhelming. Jesus didn't come and do all of that so that you could get overwhelmed and then hesitate. But we do that, don't we? God says, here's the abundant life. And we say, I don't know, God. This looks too good to be true. I want to read the fine print. It doesn't make us unusual. We've been doing this throughout history. The ancient Israelites did that. Now we still do it today. God says, I got this great thing for you. I have a land flowing with milk and honey. I have these gifts, and the gift is just that you might live in relationship with me and with one another. The gift is that you might be present now and let those things of the past go. The Israelites get back to Israel after being held captive in Assyria, after being held captive in Babylon, after being slaves of Egypt. And God says, now you can live. And instead we want to say, those dirty Egyptians and Babylonians, why did they do that to us? If they had only treated us better, then I might be happy. But I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to live joyfully, Because she shouldn't have said that to me 10.5 years ago. I'm going to sit here and hold a grudge because that teacher shouldn't have given me a C, even though I didn't do all the reading. When are you going to let that go? That's the message from Isaiah. He said, look, now you can build houses and live in them. Things may have been bad before and you didn't get to live in the houses you were building. But now, these are your houses. You're going to get to plant trees and they're going to grow. They're going to grow and you're going to get to eat the fruit. You're going to get to live under the shade of the tree. Earlier this week, Eileen Fail's daughter sent us a package of the history of St. Giles. And we got to look at some 1984 and 1989 directories. And you guys, well, I know I tell you to live in the present, but time is real. And it passes, and it leaves certain consequences. But we were looking, and we were like, how old is Debbie Beatty in these pictures? She looks like she's 15. Come to find out she was 23. 1984. The sanctuary was over there. All they had was an elevation drawn of this building. And in front of the sanctuary, that's over there, the fellowship hall, now the columbarium, just outside the columbarium, that's what those doors are, for those of you that don't know, was this little sapling. And I said, where's the big oak tree? And some people came and explained to me that oak trees can grow over the space of about 40 years. It's huge, Sue. It's like this big around, that oak tree that's there now. And it did that in, to me, a relatively short amount of time. It went from a sapling. I love that tree. It gives such beautiful shade. Things change. Things grow. We might have a few more wrinkles, those of us that were here then. Some of us weren't here then, you know. But we're here because of that family that worship together. When I say family, I mean this whole congregation. And you live together, and you built something. You know, by 1989, that thing that was just an elevation on page 3 of the 1984 directory was the front page. And it was this space that we're in. Now a building is just a building. What matters is what goes on in here. And we celebrated the Lord's Supper here on Thursday night in a beautiful presentation. And we can remember what Jesus has said in the past. Hold those good things, the things he said to us in Galilee or in the building that is now the fellowship hall. Remember those things, those promises, and see how they have come true. See how blessed we are that we get to live under the shade of what was once just a sapling. Isn't life grand? One of you greeted me this morning and said, "Isn't it amazing?" And I needed to hear that. Thank you. Isn't it amazing? That's that Navajo greeting. Hi, how you doing? They say, "Isn't it amazing?" And so I want to say to you, isn't it amazing? Because that's what the angels are saying to Mary and to the men once they come around and start listening to the women. What's wrong with men? They're saying that Jesus came, he lived, he died. And at the Catholic Mass on Good Friday, the people in the pews read what the crowd says, and they stand there and they say, "We don't want Jesus, we want Barabbas. Release the criminal for us." Because our hearts have turned against Jesus, and we say, "Crucify him" on Friday. And that's you and me. If we were there, we would have been in that crowd. And God says, "I don't care. I'm still going to reach out to you in love." And those things that you did, that you're trying to remember, that are keeping you from being joyful today, those are not who you are. That pain that you're carrying around might have life and have it more abundantly. Won't we grab hold of it today? On this of all days, let's open our hearts and say, Jesus, come in. Open our hearts and say, God, not my will, but your will. Let us say, God, I know you don't require sacrifice of an animal or a difficult sacrifice of some sort, but I do know that you require all of me. And let me tell you, if you give your all to God, God will give you everything. It's already there. We just need to stop looking for the living among the dead. Let us celebrate life today. He is risen.